Hey there. What we're going to talk about right now is the difference between blue-green deployments and feature switching and the subtle differences between them. I just like this quote. For some reason, I thought it was someone famous. Evidently, this was some dude back in the 1800s at Yale that did this quote. And the reason I bring it up is I think in theory, these two approaches are quite similar and accomplish the same effect, but there's quite a bit of difference practically in how you implement them and where they have value and where they have problems. So first, we're going to talk about blue-green deploy release. In this pattern, typically what happens is there's something in front of different infrastructure that allows you to direct traffic to blue green, red blue. There's all kinds of variation. I hate blue green because I've had a few buddies that were blue green colorblind, and if you color code things blue green, they were like, I don't know. It's if you don't have a label blue or green, they can't see the difference. But in our example here, blue is a deployed code base that is released to customers. And I have an earlier video talking about the difference between deploy and release. I'll figure out how to link it into this one. But blue is right now production, serving production traffic. Users are using it, that's fine. Green is typically a different set of infrastructure. You've deployed your entire code base there with all the new stuff on it. It's not released yet because no users can get to it. And typically in this model, you get all of the new release or none of it. There's not a great way to cherry pick. We can talk about at the end why you almost need both of these, depending on what you're trying to do. But the release to production and the rollback process is typically flipping from one side to the other. Obviously, you can have more than two sides. This does get very complicated when you have multiple permutations. However, sometimes you need it. It's also good for HA failover in multi-region deployments. If you only want one hot side, the blue side can be your hot side with traffic. Green can be a fast follower or a read-only copy. When something fails, you switch to green. It is now the hot side. Blue is now a follower, or you may throw it away and fix it, whatever you got to do. The one caveat we'll say with this, when you talk about different combinations of features being on and off, this isn't very scalable from a number of permutations perspective. Let's say you have 5 features and you want every permutation of each feature on and off ready to be flipped in between readily, or you want to direct subsets of traffic. You're going to need 25 different sets of infrastructure to run it on, or 25 different deployment units. You can see how that's going to have a scale problem. It's also can be more expensive, especially if you want an active or a passive standby always running to fail over quickly. That's why I do tend to think of this as more of a failover or an infrastructure type pattern more than a feature release type pattern. We move on to the feature switch release model. That's what I talked about in the earlier video when trying to talk about the differences between deploying and releasing. In this model, typically you only have one code base or one code base per tier. Never mind, I won't get into that. One code base. In the code base, you have the ability to, at runtime, determine if a certain feature or subset of features should be on or off. The different permutations then get very scalable because you can have hundreds or thousands of different combinations that can all individually be turned on and off, all in one deployment unit. Rollback is just switch it off. You don't have to switch any infrastructure. You don't have to you really don't even need any routing. You just need a way to configure things at runtime. Typically, it's all in the same infrastructure, although, when we talk about combining this, sometimes you might have a middle tier that the feature is hit different infrastructure or hit a green side or a blue side of deployed code bases, especially if you get into things like mainframes or mini legacies kind of stuff. Sometimes you're going to switch from maybe a legacy big iron deployment to some sort of cloud-based solution. Your middle tier might all be running in the cloud, for example, but it might have to hit different infrastructure. So that's sort of a variation of the two mixed together. The important detail, I think, though, is for whatever reason I put last. Well, the second most important. The deploy and the release are decoupled by logic, typically, not by infrastructure or routing or something like that, like they are in the blue-green deploy. So now the drum roll, please. Which one's better? Well, of course, the answer is it depends. I wouldn't be a good consultant if that wasn't the answer. But I will say a lot of times blue-green is better if it's an inherent all or nothing deploy. And I mean, if there are underlying things like databases or infrastructure that have to change, and there's just no way, or it's very difficult to get around it, you might have to do a blue-green. And sometimes it might be a fallback means you lose data, or you have to recover slowly. If you need a lot of different combinations of features, or they're designed to be used for A/B testing or things like that, you almost have to use feature switching or some model like that. Generally speaking, any client of any scale or size, they need both at different times. And honestly, I'm putting these together because I get asked this question a lot, and there's a lot of debate. It's pretty clear cut in my mind. What they're used for, and I thought I'd just share some of this information. I will say, if infrastructure is sparse, going back to the mainframe example, if you're cutting from, if you're hosted on a mainframe and you're, setting up LPARs can historically, I don't know now, I haven't done it in 5-10 years, but it can be difficult. But just getting a new mainframe, if you're going down that path, is ridiculous. Probably not going to do that. You might have to resort to feature switching in most mainframe programs, at least from when I was doing that stuff. They use feature switching quite extensively. If you can't change the config without a redeploy of the code base, meaning the combination of code is baked into the code somehow, feature switching might not be as useful or as safe, because once you start redeploying as a mechanism to do releases, you introduce the risk of deploying the wrong thing, right? And you might not know what you have. And actually, that might be a good topic for a follow-up, which is release management in general, and how do you keep track of what's in a particular deployment unit and how to know when things are actually released to customers. Anyway, that's it. I tried to keep it short. Under 8 minutes, I think, is where I'm shooting for now. So hope this was helpful.